Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette, and we're back for another episode of our podcast. And today we're going to be looking ahead to the big matchup on Saturday between the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who are ranked 25th in the coaches poll. We are going to talk about that. And 16th ranked Indiana. Indiana 16th in the AP poll, 18th in the coaches poll. So a huge matchup for the Huskers, a chance to end their losing streak against ranked teams, a chance to clinch a bowl berth, and kind of thrust themselves maybe into the playoff conversation a little bit. So we'll get into it here in just a second. Before we do, make sure that you guys hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get into the comment section. And Danny, how are you doing on this Thursday morning, my friend?
I'm doing good. It's going to be nice to have Nebraska football back this weekend. There were a lot of good games last weekend, but I'm excited to get things back going and see how this team has adjusted following the bye week.
Yeah, it was interesting. Last week was kind of fun. There was some good games. That Oregon-Ohio State game was really
Yep.
interesting. It's interesting that the NCAA changed that rule about the 12th man on the field, the substitution thing with Dan Lanning. I don't know if you saw that he.
Yeah, I did. I thought it was a smart play by Lanning, but I mean, the
Yeah, it's
NCAA
interesting.
rules. Yeah.
Well, it's funny that they changed that you can change a rule that quickly. Like I thought there was, I don't know, more of a process that you had to go to. But I guess if it happens to Ohio State, they get those rule changes put in real quickly. But at any rate, and it'll be, speaking of Ohio State, before we get to Indiana, we are going to be facing the Buckeyes next week, and so Nebraska is going to be on Big Noon Kickoff back-to-back weekends. So kind of a chance for the program to showcase itself a little bit. And yeah, Indiana 6-0, man. And the more I dig into this team, the more I realize that they're legit. They average over 500 yards on offense, 300 yards passing, 200 yards on the ground. They're averaging 5.1 yards per carry. The defense has been pretty stout too for the most part. They're forcing takeaways. Their scoring defense is ranked a lot higher than I thought it was going to be, but they also haven't played a ton of competition. They gave up 28 points to Maryland. I can't remember exactly, 24 to Northwestern. So there's signs that this defense is not. I don't think it's definitely on the same level as Nebraska's. So, at any rate, what are your thoughts initially on Indiana?
Well, it starts with good quarterback play, and Curtis Rourke has certainly, been a key factor in their success. He averages almost 11 yards per pass attempts, 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 73.8 completion percentage. And, I get that Indiana may not have played, tougher teams, but at the same time, those numbers are still pretty good. So, I'm very curious to see how Nebraska, gets pressure on Rourke and also, how their defense stacks up against our offense. And, I think those are going to be two interesting subplots heading into Saturday.
Yeah, and Indiana, like, they haven't played the toughest schedule. I mean, their Big Ten opponents have been Maryland, UCLA, and Northwestern. But the thing is, they've won all their games by at least 14 points. So it's not like they're barely getting by these teams. They're putting up a lot of points. I mean, they're scoring offense. They're scoring 47 points a game. I mean, they're second in college football right now in terms of scoring offense. So it is going to be a big challenge for this team. And you mentioned it. One of my first keys is going to be getting pressure on Curtis Rourke. And you look at pass protection, Indiana's allowed 6 sacks through 6 games. I think they're like tied for 12th or somewhere. They're in the top 20. Nebraska, on the other hand, is tied for 7th in sacks as a team. We've got 20 total sacks. And I think that right there is going to tell the story of the game. Is Nebraska able to get pressure on Rourke? Are they able to get those sacks? Is Indiana going to be able to block Nebraska's front? Because they have not faced a front or a pass rush anything like Nebraska. So I think that's going to be the key matchup. And if Nebraska wins that matchup and can get pressure, I feel good about their chances on Saturday.
And I think it's important to note that Rourke had 25 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in 2022. He had over 3,000 yards. And then last season, he had 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, but over 2,000 passing yards. So this isn't just a flash in the pan season for him. He's been pretty consistent throughout his entire collegiate career. So, like you said, getting pressure is going to be paramount for Nebraska defensively, because if we let Rourke have time in the pocket to throw, he's going to make plays.
And another key for me is going to be the running game, because you look at, yes, we got to get, Nebraska has to get pressure on Curtis Rourke, but on
Mhm.
both sides of things, I think Nebraska needs to outrush Indiana in this game. And the Hoosiers are averaging 5.1 yards per attempt on offense. Nebraska's allowing 2.6. If they can force, Rourke and these guys to be, in third and long, second and long all day, that's going to make it a lot easier to get pressure. And on the same token, if Nebraska is able to run the football, I mean, Maryland and Northwestern both rushed for over 100 yards against Indiana. So Nebraska can definitely do the same thing. And if they can get 150 yards or so, keep that offense off the field, reduce the overall number of plays, I think that's a way Nebraska can, play some complementary football, help out their defense, and also, put points on the board with the running game.
And I think commitment to the run offensively for Nebraska is going to be important. We've seen, instances where, they seem to fall in love with the passing game and Dylan Raiola, and rightfully so. But at the same time, I think, consistent running and getting the running backs involved is going to be a key ingredient, if nothing else, just to control, the football and take time off the clock and establish the time of possession dominance that I believe is going to be really important.
Yeah, time of possession. You need to win time of possession battle. And then another key for me is going to be winning the turnover battle. Both teams have done an exceptional job of
Mm-hmm.
not turning the football over. They both average 0.07 turnovers a game. So basically under a turnover per game. Nebraska's done a little bit of a better job taking it away from teams, averaging 1.7 takeaways. Illinois is at 1.2. And again, that comes down to the pressure. If, a lot of times when you see, interceptions or things like that happen, it's because the defensive line's getting pressure on the quarterback. So if they can do that, Tommy Hill, there's hopefully a chance that he can play. Say, all right, maybe one of these guys can get an interception, get a big play. Rourke's only had 2 all season, pretty similar to Dylan Raiola in that sense. But whoever wins the turnover battle, I think, is probably going to win this game, or at the very least, I don't think Nebraska can win this game while losing the turnover battle. I think they've at least got to be even or +1 to win on Saturday.
And the Big Ten Conference knows about Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher as the guys that can get pressure on the quarterback. James Williams might be the best kept secret, although not a secret for long. If he had another game like he did against Rutgers, and he really was able to provide pressure on a day when Robinson and Hutmacher played well, but they didn't bring that pass rushing element. They focused more inside, making tackles inside. So I think a big game from James Williams against Indiana is going to be, crucial for this defense's success. And I'd love to see him continue to build off of what he was able to do just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and James Williams, the other thing too, Prince Mamalian, he's not getting quite as many sacks, but if you look at his pressure, win rate, it's not that far behind James Williams. So if Nebraska can get in a situation where they can have Princewell and James Williams pinning their ears back, rushing the quarterback, then you've got Nash and Ty Robinson pushing the pocket from the middle. That's a good situation. So hopefully, they can get there. They've got to get some hits on the quarterback. But yeah, I think that's a good segue. James Williams has been kind of an X factor this season for Nebraska, but looking at this matchup, what are going to be some of the X factors for both teams, I guess, starting with the Huskers? What do you think is going to be an X factor in this matchup? Could be a player, could be, the kicking game, any element of this matchup.
I think establishing the running game is going to be important to this matchup just because it'll provide some balance offensively. I know I just talked about it, but I feel like at times we fall in love with Dylan Raiola and the passing offense, rightfully so. But I feel like, getting the running backs more involved and, also just trying to control the tempo, control the pace is going to be important, especially in the second half. I'd love to see Nebraska play a complete game of football and not just score in the first or second half. And, I think getting the running game involved and, moving the ball forward is going to be important.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to agree with you. I'm gonna single out somebody individually. Emmett Johnson. I feel like this is a game where Emmett Johnson could have a really big impact just because he has that ability to get those explosive runs. We've seen that over the course of the Big Ten play, especially. He's been the guy to get more explosive runs than Dante Dowdell or even Ramir Johnson, which they've both gotten some, but Dowdell's kind of more the grinded out type of back and I feel like look at what Roman Hemby of Maryland. He averaged almost 10 yards a carry against this defense. So there are plays to be had. I feel like this offensive line, is kind of finding its groove. Gunnar Gatula doing a solid job out there at left tackle. And I just feel like that we're going to see Emmett Johnson get a couple of explosive runs, fit 10, plus 10, plus 15 runs that are going to help this team kind of establish itself and get some more points offensively. And I just feel like whether it's the screen game or kind of some delay stuff. I just feel like we're going to see him make a couple of explosive plays on Saturday.
I do have some reservations about the offensive line in terms of run blocking. I don't think they've been the best, so I'm curious to see what they'll be able to do on Saturday.
Yeah, and that's where, it's interesting with Micah Mazuka because he's clearly, a better run blocker than Henry Luftowski. I don't think there's any debate about
Yeah.
that. I mean, they brought him in on that short yardage package last week, and he was a big reason why they were successful. So I don't know. I wouldn't hate if he eventually, worked his way back into the lineup, even if there was a little bit of a rotation. You do see teams, some teams do that. You take one series, Luftowski takes the next one. But yeah, I am interested to see that because I do think they need to be a little bit better in that regard as well. I agree.
Because as much as people criticize Marcus Satterfield for not running the football at points, he has had running plays. They just haven't been successful. So I think that kind of clouds the judgment sometimes. And I guess one of my other big X factors, my second one, is to get Ja'Cory Barney the football. I've been singing his praises pretty much throughout the season, and he's just a dynamic speed playmaker. I love him on that sweep play, and getting him the football as often as possible, and just having him utilize his speed, especially in one-on-one or open field situations. I think he could really be an important piece for Saturday.
Yeah, and then another X factor, whether it's going to be positive or negative, I think it's going to be the kicking game. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, Matt Rule talked about some adjustments. They had an old Nebraska assistant coach in there helping out this week, and I do like that Rule is willing to look at different things, look at different players. He said he was excited, quote, were his words, about how the special teams are going to perform. I don't really know if Tristan Albano is going to be out there, but hopefully, if we get in a spot where, you're in a 35-yard field goal or something like that, Nebraska can take advantage, because it's games like this where, a poor special teams performance could really hurt you, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to even see the ball go through the uprights consistently, I think would do wonders for the kicker's confidence too, because they have struggled this year. But, I think another, key player for Saturday is going to be Isaiah Nair. He's established himself as, one of Dylan Raiola's favorite weapons, and he's been able to make some really big plays and get touchdown catches. So I think, he is going to be somebody that is going to need to step up and continue to play at a high level on Saturday.
Yeah, and this passing game, is going to have to rev itself up. I mean, we've seen it. They almost threw for 300 yards against Illinois in that overtime loss, but they're going to have to pick it up offensively, and I think they're ready. I mean, this defense from Illinois or from Indiana is not great. I mean, they are only allowing 11 points per game. So I mean, or 14 points per game, excuse me. So that, which ranks them 11th in the country. Got my numbers a little mixed up there. But you look at some of the teams they played. I mean, Florida International, Western Illinois, they held them under 10 points. I mean, Charlotte scored 14, but yeah, Maryland and Northwestern scored 28 and 24 points. So I feel that Nebraska should be able to move the ball on these guys. So in that regard, let's get to some bold predictions. We'll fire off a few of these. I'll start my first bold prediction. I think Dylan Raiola, as we were just on this topic, is going to throw for 300 yards on Saturday. I just think it's going to turn into a little bit more of a shootout. And I think Nebraska's going to be able to run the football, like I said, with Emmett Johnson. And that's going to lead to some opportunities to, actually really play action, turn your back to the defense, hit some guys like Ja'Cory Barney, Isaiah Nair, Jalen Lloyd. I could really see Jalen Lloyd. I've been waiting for him to hit like a 50-yard play, like we saw in the spring game. Maybe this week will be it, but I really feel like this is the week that Dylan Raiola gets 300 yards.
You took mine, so I'm going to have to think of one on the spot here. Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks will both have touchdown catches on Saturday. They've established themselves. I mean, you mentioned trying to get Jalen Lloyd more involved. I think for better or for worse, Banks and Nair have been Raiola's favorite targets, and that has, kind of limited the target share for some of the other wide receivers. But, Banks and Nair have played well, so I think they're going to get a touchdown catch each on Saturday because they've established themselves in the passing game.
I like that prediction because Indiana's just not a great pass defense, and I do think that these receivers, Banks and Nair especially, they're really good at getting the ball, playing the ball in the air. So I'm excited to see how they do. I'm going to piggyback, off my prediction, and I'm going to go ahead and say that Jalen Lloyd does get a touchdown in this game, and I'm going to say it's like a plus 25-yard touchdown, whether it's one of those crossers or something. I just think with all the other weapons, you got to defend Ja'Cory Barney, you got to defend Nair, you got to defend Banks, you got to worry about Thomas Fedoni. There's a lot of different guys you got to worry about on this offense, and I just feel like, man, you got to have a lot of good corners to stick with Jalen Lloyd, and at some point, I really want to see Raiola hit like a 50-yard bomb. Maybe it happens this week, but I just feel like Jalen Lloyd at some point is going to catch one of those, kind of like he did last year, break it off for a touchdown run. So I'm going to say it happens this week. Breaks a tackle, boom, touchdown.
James Williams will have at least 2 sacks on Saturday. It's my bold
Yeah.
prediction. I mean, he's going to continue to go on that hot streak and, continue to see his stock rise, I think, with Saturday's performance.
I'm going to say, and I don't know how bold of a prediction this is, but I believe that Nebraska will hold Indiana under 100 yards, and they will continue their streak of not allowing a rushing touchdown. So they're the only team right now in college football that has not allowed a rushing touchdown. That's our black shirt defense for Nebraska, and I think they keep that streak intact on Saturday. And it's like Ty Robinson said, when they get close, they just don't get in. And, he put it very simply, and I think Indiana's going to have a rude awakening when they're trying to run the football on Saturday.
It's funny because Brian Buschini got a black shirt, and even he can tackle well. So everybody can tackle well on that defense. And I think that's a good prediction. I'm not sure about under 100 yards, but I could see the no rushing touchdowns. Under 100 yards is just hard to do, So I'm trying to think of one for special teams. I'm going to say Nebraska will make all its field goals on Saturday. That's my prediction. That is very bold. That is just like italicized, all caps bold, but Nebraska will make all its field goals on Saturday.
I think I had that last week, except I put that they won't miss any. And so even though they didn't make a field goal, I still technically took it. They didn't miss any kicks. So that was my bold prediction, was that they would not miss any kicks last week. And I guess my bold prediction for special teams, no blocks. We're not going to see a blocked punt or a blocked kick today, which shouldn't be a bold prediction. But when you have 4 blocks in 2 weeks, I mean, to go a game without one would be nice, but it's still, I mean, you have to be a little bit excited. I'm not excited, but just like tickled at the fact that you had a team. Yeah, Nebraska had 2 kicks blocked in consecutive games, and they won both games, and they were Big Ten conference games. So I think that there's definitely some silver lining there.
Yeah, they're finding ways to win, and they're learning how to handle adversity, which is something that previous teams would not and could not have done. So there's always a positive there.
And I think too, it's showing that they're a better overall team, right? Because the better you get as a team, the more leeway you have, right? The more mistakes you can make. Like Ohio State can afford to let a team score like 17 unanswered points to start the game. Not saying that you want to, but they could still come back and win that game, right? Whereas Nebraska might be a little more challenged in doing that. And so the better you get as a team, I feel like the more you're able to overcome. Not that you want to make those mistakes. You don't want to have kicks blocked, obviously, but it's still a good sign, I think, that you can kind of overcome those things. It is interesting looking at this matchup. Indiana is a 6.5 point favorite. Going into Saturday, the over under is 51. So, Vegas kind of expecting something like not a super shootout, but kind of in the 20s. So, let's get into it. Unless you do have any other bold predictions that you want to make before we get to our final score prediction here.
I'll do one for Indiana. Curt Cignetti will be a finalist for Coach of the Year.
Yeah, definitely.
He's a good coach. I like him.
He definitely should be Coach of the Year. And yeah, there's definitely part of me, as a Michigan fan, that's like, man, we should have just got that guy. I mean, I know that didn't work out that way. Obviously, I didn't even know like he was going to be available. But if Sharon Moore does not work out for Michigan, I would call Curt Cignetti. And
he wins everywhere he goes, and he has a swagger that his players buy into. So,
I mean, I'm not trying to say, but like he definitely, I feel like somebody in the Big Ten is going to steal this guy away from Indiana. Like he's not staying in Indiana forever. So enjoy him while you have him, Hoosier fans, because it's not going to be for long, in my opinion. He's going to be.
I don't think so either. And he's like I said, he's a winner everywhere he goes. He has a great energy. The players love it. So I'm curious to see where he ends up in a couple of years.
But it is going to be interesting to see what happens, because I think whoever wins this game is going to be, in the playoff conversation, at least for a little bit. I mean, if Nebraska wins this game, it's going to be a whole week of hype about Nebraska, Ohio State. And, if Indiana does, they're 7-0 and they're in the top 15. So it's like, I do think that that's kind of interesting. I'm not saying that Nebraska is going to make the playoffs or any stuff like that, but if they could win this game and then they could just be competitive next week, then you're at least, you're 6-2. And you're probably ranked, and I mean, you're at least in the you're in the mix, right? Like if you're, like a golf tournament sense, like if you're making the back nine turn at the Masters, you're like within 5 or 6 shots, not saying you have a great chance, but if you make a couple eagles, you're in the mix. And that's where I feel Nebraska can be in the playoff race if they win this game on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I definitely think they can be. And obviously we have the Ohio State matchup next week, so that's going to be tough. But, still, they could very much be in the playoff conversation moving forward. And that would do wonders for the program. And honestly, put Matt Rule in Coach of the Year finalist category as well.
I guess my last bold prediction, I do think that Nebraska is going to intercept Curtis Rourke at least one time, which maybe not a huge bold prediction, but whether it's Sayer Wright or even Hartzog, kind of coming off the bench, if he has to come off the bench with Buford, one of those guys I think is going to get an interception, because I do think that James Williams and Princewell and those guys are going to get pressure on Curtis Rourke that he has not seen at least this season. So he's a good quarterback, though. I mean, Frank Solich was talking him up in an article or an interview he did with Steve Sipple. So I'm like, man, this guy's a player. And yeah, Kurt Cignetti is a big time coach. You don't go to Indiana and turn them into a winner overnight, but he was smart too. And he brought a lot of players over from James Madison. I mean, Indiana's number one receiver this year is a guy who had over 1,100 yards last season for James Madison. So, it's like,
yeah.
And that's like the starting running back too, Tyson Lawton. He came over from James Madison. So if you have guys that can adapt to your system, that definitely can help you transition. So now let's transition to our score prediction. Like we said, Indiana 6.5 point favorite for this one. Danny, what's your prediction, man?
I don't like the 6.5 point favorite for Indiana. I'm actually gonna go Nebraska 31-21.
31-21 Nebraska. I agree with that. I definitely think I'm confident that Nebraska will cover the spread on Saturday. I'm not as confident that they will win the game, but I am going to predict them to win. I'm going to say 27-24 Nebraska, which makes me realize that I'm predicting us to make 2 field goals. But you know what?
I'm like, do you really want it to come down to a field goal? I don't know.
But you know what? Things get crazy. So I think that they'll get like a goal line situation where they like a goal to go, where maybe they'll get held to a field goal. And I think, that's like an extra point. And John Hall has it. I know he's missed field goals, but he's not like been horrible. He's making extra points. And so, yeah, I do think he's finally going to make one, and maybe Tristan Ovana will be healthy, but I think we'll get like a 10-point lead. And then, they'll do the Indiana will come back. And I think that they'll have a drive, because similar to Rutgers, where they have a chance to win the game. And I think our defensive line, black shirts, are going to close it out. And we're going to end our losing streak against ranked teams and clinch a bowl game in the same day. So if that happens, like, that'll be the happiest moment I've had as a Nebraska fan. And it seriously might be a decade. Like, I mean, since the Bo Pelini era, possibly.
I can see it happening. And, it would be nice to get that 6th win early in the season and, get a chance to not relax the rest of the season, but know that we at least have a bowl game secured.
Yeah, it just would be, then we can move on to a different goal. Then it could be focused on like trying to get, 8 wins or getting to the play. Just like we can talk about something else. We don't have to sit there and be like, we're the last Power 4 team that hasn't made a bowl game since whenever. Like even Vanderbilt's, I think, been to a bowl game since like we have last. So we just got to end it. And it's kind of like one of those, it's like the more, it's like baseball, you're trying to clinch with the magic number. Like the more you lose, like the farther you get into it, the harder it is to get that last one. So I just wanted to see him get out of the way, and it would be great to just beat Indiana. I think that too would truly like really announce like, hey, Nebraska football, we're back. Like we're finally back. Like we beat a good team on the road, and we're going to go see what we can do against Ohio State next week. So that would be like a dream scenario.
I agree. And it's like when my Red Sox broke their 86-year-old curse, you were waiting every year. And then finally 2004 was the year, and everybody was so happy, so relieved. And it kind of, lifted a weight off of the shoulders of the team. And I think making a bowl game would lift the weight off the shoulders of the program. And I mean, it would do wonders for recruiting as well.
It would do a lot for recruiting. Just you can see that the recruiting momentum building, and this team hasn't really won that much yet. I mean, 5-1 is 5-1, but it's still it's not 9-3. And I truly want to see these guys like Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmaker. I mean, Jamari Butler. I want these guys who have stuck it out. They could have transferred and left. John Bullock. I mean, they could have went to the NFL. They could be cashing their paychecks
Gifford
right now. Yeah, Isaac Gifford. I mean, I want to see these guys playing a freaking bowl game. They deserve it. They came back for it, and I think they're going to get it. And I would love to see them get it this weekend, and just to, beat a top 20, like to beat a top 25 team, like just to have that significant win. They beat Iowa a couple years ago, which was nice, but this would be on a different level, and this would be, I can't even remember the biggest win. I mean, this would definitely be the biggest win since they beat Michigan State, I would say, in that Saturday night game when was it Brandon O'Reilly? Is that his last name?
Yep.
I'm like,
No,
yeah.
Brandon Riley. Yeah,
Yeah, Brandon Riley. I don't know why I was trying to throw the O in there, like O'Reilly Auto Parts, but Brandon Riley was with the force out. Yeah,
Yep.
that was a great play. So anyway,
And it would be a big win for Matt Rule too. It would be a big win for Matt Rule, and another signature win this season for him. I think Colorado was the first one for him this season, and beating Indiana, as with Indiana being ranked, would be another signature win this season. So it would be a big season for Matt Rule in that regard, with still some games left to play.
And we're not the only ones that think Nebraska's going to win. JD Pickle, one of the the On3 college football analysts, he thinks this is a Matt Rule special, and that the Huskers are going to kind of surprise people on Saturday. So I don't know. I feel good about this matchup. I think it favors Nebraska in a lot of ways. I am worried about. I do think it's going to challenge the secondary. I mean, no doubt about it. Like, this Indiana team is legit offensively, but I don't know. I feel like we've got as good a quarterback as them, and I like the defensive line better, straight up.
Mhm.
So I'll take the team. I'll take the team with the better defensive line as long as they've got the quarterback any day of the week, and that's why I feel like Nebraska's going to be tough to beat, for the next 3 years, or at least the rest of this season. I mean, we got to see what the defensive line can develop into the next couple of years, but James Williams and Princewell aren't going anywhere, so I still feel pretty good about that.
A lot of talent coming down the pipe on the defensive line too. So
yeah, and then Nebraska's going to be, I think, a strong transfer portal destination. It's going to be nice this year. We don't need a quarterback, so we can use our money and try to get defensive tackle. That's what we're going to need, defensive tackle. You know what I mean? So start scouting now. But hey, like Bear Alexander, whatever, the USC guys out there, go talk to him right now. Go get his ass on campus. Like, I don't care that he quit on USC. Like, whatever. Like, that's just it is weird, but that's what guys are doing nowadays. So like, I would take advantage of that opportunity. Maybe Nebraska's like, I don't want that guy. I mean, Matt Rule is pretty strict about his culture, but I don't know. I just believe in talent. So
yeah, I mean, it seems like, quite honestly, if we're being completely honest here, that the coaches have been a bit more of a problem than the players during Matt Rule's tenure. But other than that, exactly. Honestly, and before I go, quick shout out to John Butler, the defensive backs coach. Talk about a guy that just came in kind of at the last second. He's done a nice job with the defensive backs, and I think he deserves a lot of credit too.
He does, and we'll wrap that up there, you guys. We're going to try to shoot for a Saturday morning chat, so we may make it, we may not, depending on how the schedule has been. So, but if not, we will be back on Monday with our fallout from whatever happens on Saturday. So if you haven't already, please make sure, again, you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.